A 17-year-old high school student stepped onto the track, lined up against grown professional athletes, and ran 44.10 seconds in the 400 meters. Let that sink in. Not in a junior race. Not against kids his own age. Against full-grown men. Professionals. Specialists. Athletes who have spent years mastering one of the most brutal events in track and field. And when it was over, the entire stadium lost its mind. Because what they had just seen wasn't normal. It wasn't even rare. It was history. But what makes this story even crazier is that just months earlier people were already saying Quincy Wilson was finished. They said the hype was too much. They said the pressure was breaking him. They said burnout was coming. And then Quincy Wilson answered all of them in the most terrifying way possible. This is the story of the teenager who got doubted, got written off, and then delivered one of the most unbelievable 400-meter performances the sport has ever seen. Part 1. Who is Quincy Wilson? Before the world started calling him a phenomenon, Quincy Wilson was just a kid from Chesapeake, Virginia. He came from an athletic family. His mom was a Hall of Fame-level college athlete. His dad played football at the Naval Academy. His sister ran track too. So yes, sports were in his blood. But let's be honest, having athletic parents doesn't automatically make you a superstar. A lot of kids grow up around sports and never come close to greatness. What made Quincy different wasn't just talent. It was belief. His family believed in him so deeply that they made a decision most families would never make. They didn't just support him from the sidelines. They moved their entire lives so he could attend Bullis School in Maryland, a place with a serious track program and a coach they believed could develop his gift. Think about that for a second. That's not a small decision. That's not, we'll drive a little farther for practice. That's a full family bet on one young athlete's future. And when your family makes that kind of sacrifice for you, the pressure becomes real. Because now it's not just about running fast. Now you feel like you have to prove everyone right. The scary part? Quincy started proving them right almost immediately. At an age when most kids are still figuring out whether they even like training, Quincy was already doing things that made people stop and stare. At just 14 years old, he broke a national age group record in the 400 meters that had stood for 30 years. 30 years. That kind of record doesn't just disappear unless someone truly special comes along. And still, even with that achievement, there were doubters. Because in track and field, people have seen this story before. A young athlete bursts onto the scene. People go crazy. The headlines start. The expectations explode. And then a few years later, they disappear. Sometimes the body changes. Sometimes the pressure gets too heavy. Sometimes the early hype becomes too much to carry. So yes, Quincy Wilson was exciting. But many people were still waiting. Waiting to see if he was truly different. Waiting to see if he could survive real pressure. Waiting to see if the talent would still hold up when the spotlight got hotter. One of the biggest reasons Quincy didn't get destroyed by all that early hype was his coach, Joe Lee. And this part matters. Because when young athletes show insane talent, adults often make the same mistake. They rush them. Too many races. Too much training. Too much exposure. Too much too soon. But Joe Lee didn't do that. He understood that Quincy wasn't just a fast kid. He was a long-term project. A talent that had to be protected, not exploited. So instead of chasing every headline and every short-term result, they built carefully. They managed the schedule. They controlled the load. They focused on development instead of noise. That patience didn't make huge headlines. But later it may have saved everything. Then came the moment that changed everything. Paris 2024. Quincy Wilson, still just 16 years old, made the U.S. Olympic 4x400 relay pool. That alone was crazy. He became the youngest American male track and field Olympian in history. A 16-year-old. On Team USA. At the Olympics. In the relay prelim, he ran the opening leg. He looked nervous. He wasn't perfect. But the team got the job done. And when Team USA won gold in the final, Quincy Wilson became something almost impossible to believe. An Olympic gold medalist, while still in high school. Imagine that. Homework during the week. Gold medal in the bag. The whole world was watching now. And that's when the pressure reached another level. Because it's one thing to be a talented prodigy. It's another thing entirely to become a global expectation. Then came 2025. And suddenly the story changed. Fast. In January, Quincy entered a 500-meter race at the Virginia Showcase, and lost badly. Not narrowly. Not by a blink. Badly. Then came more losses. More disappointing results. More questions. More criticism. He didn't qualify for the 2025 World Championships. And just like that, the conversation around him flipped. The same people who had been calling him the future of the 400 meters started asking if the hype had been fake all along. That's how brutal sports can be. One minute you're the chosen one. The next minute, people are making videos explaining why you were overrated. Some even started openly worrying that Quincy was burning out. That the pressure, the schedule, the expectations, all of it, was becoming too much. And remember, he was still just a teenager. Most kids that age are trying to survive school stress and social pressure. Quincy Wilson was dealing with national scrutiny, Olympic expectations, and the internet trying to decide whether his career was already falling apart. That kind of pressure breaks people. A lot of athletes would have panicked, changed coaches, changed training, changed strategy, started forcing results. But Quincy didn't. He went back to the basics, back to the process, back to the people who believed in him. And then came Memphis. July 13, 2025. Ed Murphy Classic. Memphis, Tennessee. This wasn't a high school race. This was a real professional meet. Real grown men. Real experience. Real pressure. Quincy Wilson stepped onto the line against athletes who had been competing at that level for years. And then the gun went off. He attacked the race aggressively but under control. Through the first 200 meters he looked composed. Not desperate. Not wild. Just focused. Then came the final straight. And Quincy opened up. When he crossed the line the clock read 44.10. That number changed everything. Because 44.10 wasn't just fast. It was historic. It became the fastest 400-meter time ever run by an under-18 athlete. Ever. Anywhere. Number 17-year-old in history had ever gone faster. Not only that, it was one of the fastest times in the entire world that year across all ages. Think about how insane that is. A high school student. Running one of the fastest 400s on the planet? Not in theory. Not for his age. For real. Against professionals. And winning. That wasn't hype anymore. That wasn't promise anymore. That was proof. What made this performance so shocking wasn't just the time. It was the timing. Because this wasn't a story of a young star rising smoothly to greatness. This was a comeback. A response. A direct answer to months of doubt. He had just gone through losses, criticism, pressure, and public skepticism. People were already wondering if his best moment had come too early. And then he produced the kind of race that forces everyone to shut up. That's why it hit so hard. Because sports fans love greatness. But they love resilience even more. And Quincy Wilson showed both. What happened after the race might be the most revealing part of the whole story. After all the noise. After the stadium erupted. After he delivered one of the greatest teenage performances the event has ever seen. Quincy didn't turn it into a huge moment about himself. He didn't go on a revenge tour. He didn't start calling out doubters. He didn't post a long speech. Instead, his message was simple. On to the next one. That's it. And honestly, that may be the scariest part for everyone else. Because that mindset tells you this isn't a kid who thinks he has made it. This is a kid who thinks he's still building. And if he's already running 44.10 while still in high school, what happens when he fully matures? What happens when the body gets stronger? When the race intelligence gets sharper? When the experience gets deeper? When the pressure becomes familiar instead of overwhelming? That's when this story goes from exciting to dangerous. The 400 meters is one of the hardest events in all of sports. It destroys the legs. It punishes bad pacing. It exposes weakness instantly. That's why great 400-meter runners are rare. And that's why Quincy Wilson is being talked about the way he is. Because when someone this young runs this fast, the natural question becomes impossible to ignore. How far can this go? Can he become the face of American sprinting? Can he dominate the global stage? Can he win Olympic gold individually? Can he one day challenge the greatest marks the event has ever seen? Right now, nobody knows. But one thing is certain. After 44.10, nobody can dismiss him anymore. Not as hype. Not as a flash in the pan. Not as a kid who peaked too early. Quincy Wilson is real. And if this is only the beginning, the rest of the track world should be very, very worried. So here's the question. Was Memphis the moment Quincy Wilson announced himself as the future king of the 400 meters? Or was it just the first warning shot? Because if a teenager can do this to professional adults right now, imagine what the next few years could look like. Let me know in the comments. Does Quincy Wilson win Olympic 400-meter gold in the future? And more importantly, can he one day become the fastest 400-meter runner the world has ever seen? If you enjoyed this story, drop a like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because Quincy Wilson's story is just getting started.